On Beacon Hill, Western Massachusetts will be losing another legislator who has decided to throw his hat into another political ring. With current Westfield Mayor Brian Sullivan not seeking re-election, longtime Republican State Senator Don Humason has announced he is leaving his seat to run for mayor of his hometown. Ray Hershel sat down with Senator Humason to talk about his career at the State House and his decision to seek the mayor's seat.
It was an interesting decision to make. Obviously, some of that decision was made for me when our mayor announced that he wasn't going to run again. When Brian said that he wouldn't be a candidate this fall, I started to get some phone calls from some friends and supporters in Westfield. My own family talked to me about it. I began to think about it a little bit. And then the more I considered it, the more I thought, what a great opportunity to represent my hometown in a different sort of way than I have been doing in the legislature over the past 16, 17 years. It's obviously where my heart is most of the time. It's where I was born and where I'm raising my family and where I'd like to, make a difference at the end of my career and be able to look back and say I did a good thing for Westfield. So I'm hoping to have the opportunity to run and win and serve the people of my hometown.
How difficult was that decision? I mean, it's grueling going back and forth on the Pike every day to go to Boston and so forth.
When you consider those things, it makes it easy. Obviously, I'd much rather spend 2 or 3 hours a day in meetings in Westfield than in my truck on the Turnpike, and that's how lately the road's gotten worse and worse. And it's a frustration that it's always been. That's a waste of time for us in Western Mass to commute back and forth all the time to get to the State House because it just takes so long. So if I think about those things, that's easy. Time with my family, more time back in town. Those are the good things, the perks of being back in Westfield. On the other hand, I really like what I do. I enjoy my job. I enjoy representing the communities in the second-hand New Hampshire district and the people that I represent. I like working with the colleagues in the Senate and in the House and down at the State House, and so I would miss that very much. I thought about it, though, and really, I won't stop working with them. In a lot of ways, as mayor of Westfield, I would still have the opportunity to work with my colleagues locally, with the legislators, with other mayors that I've had a chance to meet, with select boards in my region of Western Massachusetts, and still be able to work with Charlie and Karen in Boston and the folks at the State House. So I think those connections will actually be a benefit to me and to help me work as mayor.
That was my next question, and that is, how do you feel your legislative experience? You started in the House in 2002,
right.
And it was, 2012 you were elected to the Senate. How do you feel that experience in the House and Senate will help you become a better mayor in Westfield? One
of the things that I always had as a priority when I was a legislator, both in the House and in the Senate, was issues affecting local governments, local aid especially, education aid, infrastructure, things that went back to our cities and towns, because as I always was sort of raised politically to believe that our municipalities were our partners in state government, so that we should work closely with them in order to help them to succeed, right? To keep property taxes low and to keep quality of living high. And so as a legislator working on budgets and issues and things that pertain to local governments, I think it's a natural step. I've always been focused on things back here in Western Massachusetts and especially in Westfield. And so I hope to be able to take the experience, the contacts, and the things I've been doing down in Beacon Hill and bring them home.
Now, right now, there's no announced opponents for you in the mayor's race. If elected mayor, do you have a list or a set of priorities in mind at this point that you'd like to hit the ground running with?
Absolutely, and I think, and some of those have been driven by the people that I talk to on a daily basis. A lot of them are infrastructure related. Obviously, this is pothole season in Massachusetts. Pothole season is springtime in this part of the state, and so people are really concerned about the conditions of the roads, and I think they have a good reason to be. It's a pretty bad year. I think we need to focus on infrastructure for Westfield. I think we have to focus on job creation and bringing economic development to our city. I'm not saying that the current mayor and council haven't done that, but I think that's got to be any leader's priority, is to bring in new businesses and new revenue so that we can do things like, fixing our streets and, providing services for our citizens. And so economic development and infrastructure will be the two things I focus on the most. And then there are, of course, a host of other things that any mayor would have to deal with for his or her community. I think that we have a great council and a great group of people who work for the city of Westfield that want to do a good job and make things succeed. So I'm happy to join that group.
Getting back to current issues on Beacon Hill, the House, as you know, has just passed its budget.
That's right.
Next step is the Senate. You're on the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Senator Humason, what are your expectations in terms of the budget as you see it from the Senate's point of view, and eventually the budget that's going to be adopted by the legislature and signed by the governor?
Well, we're still analyzing what the House did over the course of the 4 days of their debate. The Senate Ways and Means staff are obviously looking at that as well. I think it looked like a pretty good budget. We talked off camera, Ray, about how we believe the governor will be pleased because it's very similar in a lot of ways to what he filed. I think the House added some. I think the number is somewhere around $70 million in additional money to the bottom line of the budget. I'm not sure the Senate will do that quite as much. I've already talked to the chairman of Ways and Means about on the Senate side about what we'll do. Obviously, it's up to the members how much we want to try to to amend what the Senate puts out and try to do things that I think will benefit our own regions of the state. Ultimately, it will come out of the Senate and then go into a conference where the 6 members of the conference committee will negotiate the differences between the House version and the Senate version of the budget. We'll have, at least I hope, we'll have the budget on the governor's desk by July 1st, as we're required to do for the start of the fiscal year.
It appears to me, just reading quickly the House budget, it seems to be in line pretty much with what Governor Baker has proposed as a budget. Do you anticipate the Senate budget, for example, to be that much different when it is adopted, or do you feel there are some common grounds and themes there that everyone can agree upon?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of common grounds. I think what happens sometimes during debate, or actually right up leading up to debate, is sometimes the members will look at the budget as it came out of committee and think about ways to personalize it a little bit, ways to make the budget more beneficial back at home through amendments or earmarks to their own districts. Obviously, we try to tamp that down a little bit so it doesn't get blown up too much. But obviously, the closer it is to the House version, or the closer it is to the governor's version, the more likely it will pass without vetoes or without any kind of revisions.
I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of specific recent votes that have come up. One of them was the Senate vote to lift a welfare cap on benefits for welfare children.
Right.
I know this has been talked about back and forth. You initially, in the Senate, were the only vote against this. Can you explain your vote on and why you voted the way in which you did?
I was in the, well, I wasn't in the legislature. I was a legislative aide back when this decision was first made, years and years ago under the Weldon administration, when the legislature changed the rules about people receiving welfare per child if they were already on state assistance. So you were certainly allowed to have more children if you chose, but if you had an additional child or more children while you were receiving state assistance or welfare benefits, you wouldn't receive an added, what they call it, a stipend or an added bonus for that child. That went on to become sort of a national model and stayed that way for a couple of decades until recently, when there had been a group of progressive legislators pushing to repeal that, so that there'd be no limit. If you were on state assistance, if you were receiving taxpayer-funded benefits and had additional children, you would receive additional money and additional benefits for a child. I didn't intend to be the only person to vote against it, but I felt like it was sending sort of a wrong signal. I've always believed that what you tax or regulate, you get less of, and what you promote, you get more of. And I think I liked the rule as it was. I think there's a cost to it that is fairly expensive. It's going to be about $13 million to institute this new plan if it goes through, or actually it will go through because the Senate overrode the governor's veto. But ultimately, I didn't think it was fair that people at home were asked to basically pay to allow people on state assistance to be able to do things that people weren't allowed to do themselves. In other words, I've heard from many people who've said, I've had to control the size of my own family because of how much money we take in, my husband and I, or my wife and I. And it's not fair that folks on state assistance can have as many children as they want because they're not paying for it, we are.
And it's an issue, obviously, a difficult decision, but one in which, dignity, respect of children comes into play.
Right.
I know Deborah Harris of Mass Law Reform says, the vote affirms the dignity and humanity of every child. How do you reconcile that with the vote you took?
Well, I think obviously children are very important, and we want to take care of them as best we can as a government. I think we also have to say, though, to the individuals who ask state taxpayers and state government for help to be responsible. Other people are responsible in their own families and try to live within their means, and I think we'd ask people on welfare to do the same.
Senator Humason, another vote which you stood alone on was on the Senate approving a bill to allow X as a gender on driver's licenses. The Senate vote, I believe, was like 39-1.
It was. That was a priority of the Senate President, one of our main priorities.
Exactly. You're Senate President a priority, and yet you were the only dissenting vote on that measure.
Yeah, you know what we're doing is we're taking state government documents like your driver's license, and now this law pertains to all state documents. We're going to start looking at liquor IDs and state identification cards and licenses to carry and every other official identifying document, and say that it's okay for you to just, if you don't want to be a male or a female, to choose X as a gender. And I thought that was a slippery slope. I think it gets dangerous when there's no official requirement to prove one or the other or a gender. You can simply state whatever you want to be. It's based on personal identification at that moment, and I just thought it would be getting to a point where it's getting a little ridiculous to be able to say, you know, I don't want to live within the social realms that we've had in society for decades and centuries, in fact, and then start choosing whatever we want to put down. So I just thought I may be a minority vote in the Senate on this, but when I talk to people on the streets back here at home, I don't think it's a minority position.
Leaving the legislature at this point in your career, we have seen over the past year in the House of Representatives, Steve Kulig, John Syback retire. Peter Kolkut unfortunately passed away. Stan Rosenberg with issues, no longer Senate President. You with a lot of experience are leaving the state Senate as well. That's a big seniority and experience gap for Western Massachusetts that's clearly visible now in the legislative picture. How do you feel that will play out? Are you concerned a little bit about the lack of experience now on Beacon Hill?
Well, it's meant to be a churning process, right? It's meant to be, you know, people aren't meant to go to the legislature and stay forever. They're supposed to go in, move up, and then move out, creating room for people behind them to do the same. This was a huge gap this past year. We did suffer a lot of losses in the legislature, a lot of losses of experience, and now we've been those positions have been replaced by new members who hopefully will learn the process quickly and begin to represent their constituents and then move up the ladder in the legislature as far as seniority and experience. I'm confident that when I leave to hopefully become mayor of the city of Westfield, that the candidates who run to replace me will be able to bring their own experience to the process and also to help the legislature with new vantage points. And that's important too, that we continually sort of shuffle or stir the pot a little bit with new viewpoints and new experiences so that the legislature is always representative of the people back at home.